College football rocks and is part of the greater overall college experience. It's what makes Saturdays in the fall at your college, university, growing up fun, interesting, and exciting. If you just have a volleyball program or soccer or whatever, they can still be cool experiences. There's just something different about college football. Whether it's a D3 NAIA school or to the upper echelons of the Power 5 with 100,000 seat stadiums, it's a great experience and a great thing for colleges and universities all around the country. And for a lot of colleges that don't have football, that's generally the top question for leadership and athletic directors is are we ever going to add football? Is there something that we can do to add football? Is this ever going to be at the forefront of the university? And for some schools, they just are like, hey, we're not interested in doing that. And then there are other schools that are pursuing that, trying to figure out how they can become the next player in the college football landscape. And there's an FCS program that is on the horizon. And I hate to say, I would hate to say that it's on the way, because I don't know that it's ever going to get off the ground. If you haven't paid attention, Chicago State is maybe a college you've never heard of, but they are a Division I athletic program in everything that they have outside of football. They have, for a long time, they were a basketball independent, which means their schedule for the college basketball season would end right about now because they didn't have a conference tournament to play in. They basically were a barnstorming team that got paid by other colleges to come get their butts kicked and go back home. But Chicago State is in the process of adding football. And not just it would be cool if they recently started the process of hiring their first head coach. And I just have to wonder if Chicago State football is ever going to get off the ground. Is Chicago State football ever going to actually hit the field? And because there are a lot of things kind of working against Chicago State football. First of all, the athletic department at Chicago State, there's a recent USA Today has all of the financials for the majority of college programs that are public. And they have hey, here's how much they spent. Here's how much revenue they brought in. Here's how much the school subsidized the program, etc. There are 232 schools on this list. 232 schools that have, Division I athletics that are public, and this data is available through 2022, which feels like a long time ago, but this is some somewhat recent data. 232 schools. Chicago State is 227th on that list. The schools that are below them are either HBCUs, Maryland Eastern Shore, Alcorn State, Coppin State, Mississippi Valley State, or in such financial trouble that they have talked about either eliminating athletics altogether or dropping down to Division III, and that's the University of New Orleans. So Chicago State is well behind none of Alcorn State and Mississippi Valley State are the two schools behind them that don't have football, or that do have football, I beg your pardon. Everybody else behind them doesn't have football, and everybody else ahead of them, there are lots of schools that don't have football that are ahead of them. And football is an expensive sport to have. And especially if Chicago State is going to be one of those schools that I would guess is going to be an FCS program that probably is going to use it as an enrollment driver rather than, hey, let's be really good at this. They are going to say, hey, we're going to have either no scholarships, and the expectation is we have 120 to 130 kids on the football program that are paying tuition, baby, which I think is the overwhelmingly likely scenario. So then you need 130 helmets, 130 shoulder pads, 130 pairs of thigh pads and knee pads and tailbone pads and hip pads. And you need all sorts of equipment that the average person, if you went through that's just to equip a player. That's not before jerseys, which are going to cost thousands of dollars. Uniforms are going to cost thousands of dollars before you travel, before you do all of the other equipment, sleds and footballs and goalposts and all of these things. Practice facility, locker rooms, it is an expensive thing to start up. And when you are 227th out of 232 schools in your athletic budget, and 94% of your athletic budget comes from student fees, which means they're not selling tickets to their basketball games. They're not selling sponsorships. They're not selling a bunch of merchandise. They're not getting a bunch of fundraising things. I feel like that's a tough kind of situation to find yourself in. Now, maybe the hope is that if we add football, people will feel some connection to our school, to our university, because Chicago State is a commuter school. They're not it's not a I'm going to live on campus for 4 years type of situation. It is one of those, and not to necessarily speak ill of Chicago State, but it's in that same camp of like Southern New Hampshire, University of Phoenix, where when people ask you, where did you go to school? You don't pump out your chest and be like, I went to Chicago State. It's just not, it's not in that category. Now, maybe the hope is if the football team is good, maybe people will say, I went to Chicago State. But I question how easy it is to get an FCS program off the ground, especially if you're going to start at the FCS program. You're seeing it at UT Rio Grande Valley, that they're going to start, and they got kind of lucky that they were able to move into a soccer stadium for their stadium and didn't have to spend I don't even know if you were to like put it mild, like a $40 million for a stadium right now might be kind of like the minimum you could get a stadium built for. And Chicago State doesn't have real estate to build a stadium. They don't know where they're going to play. They don't know where they're going to build locker rooms. They don't know where they're going to build practice facilities. They are going to hire a head coach and figure all of that out with the hope that maybe they can play in the 2027, maybe 2028 school year and launch their football program. I don't want to hedge against it, because I want more college football. I want every college that has the ability to not go into like massive amounts of debt or pass the buck on to students, by the way, to have a college football program. I want more opportunities for high school football players to move up to the college ranks. And I want more connections between communities and colleges that love college football. That's only a good thing for the sport. And I like good things for the sport. But I just have to wonder if you don't have a lot of things figured out. And I understand wholly that you can figure things out along the way, that it doesn't necessarily have to be set in stone. I think if you are especially in a situation where you need to hire a head coach, before you have those things figured out, you probably need to hire a head coach who's going to be able to fundraise, who's going to want to fundraise, who's going to want to do the things that is included in building a program from scratch. And in this case, I think it's literally from scratch. But I hope it goes great. I hope it's fantastic. I hope in 5 years we're sitting here talking like, oh, man, I can't believe I never thought Chicago State was going to get off the ground. I just think it's probably more likely than not that someday we're sitting here going, oh, remember that Chicago State was going to be one of those schools that added football? Because there have been some of those. There have been some. This school is going to add football. Just somewhat recently, Xavier, a big basketball school, had talked about like, hey, here's how we add football. If we were going to do it, here's how it would look. And when you're having those conversations of like, hey, here's how it would look, they knew where they were going to play, where they were going to build their facility, where they're going to build locker rooms, how they were going to pay for it, etc. If they ever wanted to enact that plan, here's how it goes. And that feels infinitely more along than Chicago State, who's in the process of hiring a coach. And there are different ways to skin a cat, right? But sometimes I need to know damn well that you've got a cat to skin before I can be excited about it. So I question whether Chicago State ever gets off the ground. I would love to see it. I would love to see that's like a rags to riches story, where it's a program it's an athletic program that people don't know exists. Like people in Chicago don't know that Chicago State University is a Division I athletics program in their city. And so I think it would be cool to see that ascend to really high levels and to be a big time college football program. I just don't know, man. I don't think we're ever going to see that. But I'd love to be wrong. Want to know your thoughts. How hard or easy do you think it is to launch a football program in 2025? Let me know your comments in the comment box below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.